in a lot of debates, and I'm writing on climate change, so this might be a key example, each side says, if only the other side would accept the facts, would accept the science, then they would change their mind. And what's wrong with them? I mean, this is the science, this is fact, this is truth, and they must be on the payroll of the fossil fuel industry. They must not even care about the future of our children. They must be so wrapped up in their own self-interest and so deluded and susceptible to confirmation bias, unlike me, who is open-minded and objective. If only we can convince them of the facts. And the other side, most of you probably are not on the other side, maybe some of you are, they say pretty much the same thing, that the entire scientific establishment is in a collective delusion, that excludes any data that contradicts the dominant theory. And if you formulate a different hypothesis, you're out of a job. You can't get funding, you can't get grants, you can't get a seat at the policy table. So it's a I mean, they have their, like, a friend of mine was with his family, you know, and they watch Fox News 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and he was like, you know, at the end of that week, I could see how in that reality bubble, you would have to be crazy to vote for Hillary Clinton. Okay, so here we are at the Science and Non-Duality Conference that has this. Why are people so attracted to science and non-duality, or science and spirituality? It awakens a kind of a hope for a reconciliation between these two sundered, divided aspects of reality. And we would like to say, yeah, these non-dual realizations, or my spiritual life, or my experiences of, as Jude was saying this morning, discarnate entities, like, these are valid after all. So really, maybe what we're hoping for is a kind of a validation, in addition to a joining together of a split reality. So I have to ask, why is this validation so important? It's because science is the main legitimizing institution of our culture. You could even say it's the religion of our culture. It's in the sense that it is what confers righteousness to anything, like a scientific policy, a scientific reason for something. That means that it's true for real. Now, science itself says, no, 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 we're not a religion. We are the opposite of a religion. Religion takes things on faith, but we ask the world. We perform an experiment. We don't take anything on faith. We're objective. What goes missing here is that this objectivity is based on, it's based on metaphysical assumptions that are unprovable, just like any religion. Among them, objectivity, that there's a world outside of ourselves that is separate from our asking of the questions, that our questions don't change the reality that we ask about, that an experiment is repeatable, that the intention of the experimenter is irrelevant, that there's a division between observer and observed, and that the observed is constant in relation to the observer, yada, yada, yada. Okay, everyone knows this already. Another metaphysical assumption is that everything that is important or worth knowing can be measured and quantified. Now, there's a lot of other ways in which science is suspiciously similar to a religion. It has a canon of holy texts. It has its own specialized, mysterious language that only initiates can understand. It has an initiation ordeal called graduate school, upon which you finish and you get a ceremonial name change. It has a system for the indoctrination of youth. It has deified saints and martyrs, Galileo, Newton, Einstein. It has schisms, heretics. It has the faithful lay believers who actually don't understand the esoteric knowledge of the religion, but they believe in it anyway. It has a divinatory practice for the attainment of truth called experimentation. It has a body of ritual built on top of it that's called technology. I mean, the whole thing. So anyway, what I'm interested in here today is and I have 20 minutes. I want to do a little interactive thing at the end, so I'm going to try to be precise here. And it goes back to Galileo, the notion that only the measurable is real. This is a kind of reductionism that says that all of the difference, all of the uniqueness, every relationship in the world, in the universe, can be characterized by numbers. It's a deeper kind of reductionism than just saying, everything's built of these building blocks and that are built of smaller building blocks and down to the atom and the electron, et cetera, et cetera. This is a conceptual reductionism that says that all of the difference in the world is just number. And if you want to be scientific about something, you have to be quantitative. I know graduate students who get into trouble with their professors because they haven't quantified their hypothesis or subjected it to a quantifiable approach. So the problem with the problem with this idea that only the measurable is real and the validation or the cult of quantity is that when we approach the world that way and begin to make decisions based on the numbers, and where do we get that habit anyway? It's from the money world, where you are supposed to make economic decisions based on essentially solving a max-min problem to maximize. It's turned into a theory of human nature that human beings seek to maximize their rational self-interest. And then it's extended into biology too, that all beings seek to maximize reproductive self-interest and are performing implicit calculations every time they make a choice or enact their genetically programmed behavior, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, what happens when we, and this sounds good, like science-based policy, metrics-based policy. What happens is that everything that it ignores everything that we choose not to measure, cannot measure, or that is unmeasurable. Usually what we choose not to measure are the very things that would disrupt the status quo and the interests of the institutions that are already in power. Prime example would be GDP as a measure for human well-being, as a measure for progress. So what is it actually a measure of? It's a measure of the total amount of goods and services exchanged for money. And what does it leave out? It leaves out tradition, relationship, sacredness, beauty. It leaves out actually all of the things that make us rich. Community. In fact, it's the opposite of community. GDP grows when you convert relationships into services. And the things that people once did for each other without using money, like taking care of children, cooking, growing food, building houses, providing entertainment, singing songs, et cetera, get converted into paid services. Okay, so that's what gets left out. And when we see reality through the lens of the numbers that we accept, then everything else atrophies. Same thing's happening in climate change when we focus. So yeah, let's focus on, it's such a familiar, comfortable habit to focus on the numbers that we look for the easiest way to do that, adopting a convenient problem in the place of an inconvenient problem that we don't know how to solve. So the convenient problem is, and the comfortable problem is greenhouse gas emissions, which we can measure on a global scale and which have a linear cause, the levels of greenhouse gases caused by emissions that we can attack. Here's the enemy. Very comfortable. What gets left out? And this is why I think that climate change, the climate change narrative, is a disaster for environmentalism, because it sucks the air out of the room for any environmental issue that seems to have no bearing on climate change. For example, the whales. Like the whales, save the whales. Remember the days of save the whales when that was an important environmental issue, and now you never hear about saving the whales. Because what do the whales matter when, I mean, it's nice we should save the whales, you know, but what does it matter when we're facing near-term extinction because of high greenhouse gases? Well, maybe what we are missing is actually the salvation. Just to give an example, we decimate the whales, then the orcas are deprived of their major food source. So they begin to eat the seals and the sea otters. And they decimate the seals and the sea otters, which then no longer predate the sea urchins. So the population of sea urchins explodes. And then the sea urchins decimate the kelp forests. And the kelp forests actually sequester more carbon than land-based forests. Oh, darn it, you know, we should have included that chain of causality in our measurements. Yeah. The whales are important after all. So from the mindset of the cult of quantity, the solution to the failure of measurement is to measure even more. And the utopia of the metrics-based approach to reality would be to encompass everything in one big data set so that we could rationally administer the world through the precise application of force. So it's based on a theory of change that I won't go into right now. I think I talked about that last year. Okay. So what gets left out? And it's not just metrics, it's any narrative that imposes a set of categories onto the world. What gets left out is sometimes the most important thing. I think, my personal opinion, is that climate change is an initiation for our species, or the dominant culture, civilization, into the understanding that what we do to the world, we do to ourselves, that we are on a living planet. Therefore, even if we reduced carbon emissions to zero, if we continue to destroy the tissues, the organs, and the cells of Gaia, then the climate will still spin out of control. Therefore, we need to begin to value all of the things that had been excluded by our worldview of seeing nature as an inanimate machine, a complicated machine that can be reduced to a set of quantities. And even the worldview of the important thing is the greenhouse gases that we can measure, and into understanding every river, every forest, every mountain, every ecosystem as alive and sacred, and to orient toward that, even if we don't understand how it's going to reduce greenhouse gases. I mean, it would be relatively easy to change to a different fuel stock and continue civilization as normal. What happens when we let go of the customary find the enemy approach to problem solving? Two things happen, actually. One is that we realize that the problem cannot be merely put on the shoulders of a bad guy or an enemy or an other, but that the problem involves ourselves too. That we're part of the totality of the system, that our lives, our choices, our actions, the culture that we live in, for example, are part of a system of, let's say, neoliberal capitalism that creates unlivable conditions and destroys the ways of life in other places that breed poverty, that breed immigration, that breed terrorism, et cetera, et cetera. We're like, oh yeah, we're part of this whole system. That's one thing. The second thing that happens is that we don't know what to do anymore. When we can identify a linear cause, whether it's an enemy or a germ or a hormone level that's too high or greenhouse gases or something like that, when we can identify a cause, like what's killing the honeybees, let's hope that it's a fungus, because then we can apply a fungicide. But what if it's everything? What if it's everything that beekeepers do today? What if it's the entire agricultural system? What if it is the spraying of vast areas of this continent for gypsy moths and Zika viruses and things like that? What if all of these things together? What if our entire way that we're embedded in the world is the problem? We don't know what to do. This is good if we can come to the place of I don't know what to do. I would like to see a politician say, yeah, I'm running for president and I don't know what to do about healthcare. And I don't know what to do about immigration, and I don't know what to do about anything, actually, because then, at least if you don't know what to do, you're not a captive of the reflexive ways of doing things, the habits that come from the worldview of separation that has generated our civilization and that is growing old, reaching its senescence and falling apart. So I'd like to, I think I would like to do this and I hope it's okay to invite people into a little one-on-one conversation, yeah? Because underneath the unknowing, which is so necessary today, I ask indigenous people sometimes, what do you think about climate change? And they say things like, it's because we stopped doing the ceremonies around the world, the ceremonies. Or they say it's because you've taken too many metals from the tropics and exported them to the northern hemisphere. And that interferes with the Earth's energetics. Or they say it's because you stole the gold from the mountains, and the gold is the soul of the mountains, and without their soul, how can they effectively administer the land? Or they say it's because you're sucking out too much water, and the river no longer reaches the sea. So how does the ocean know what the land needs? And these seem like quaint, unscientific superstitions. And we know better than that, don't we? But our confidence that we know better than that is crumbling, because if we really knew better, we'd probably wouldn't be in a crisis that is so bewildering to us. So anyway, yeah, so I would like to see a little bit of humility in our culture, which comes from humiliation, which comes from failure. And that moment of, I don't know. Underneath the I don't know is knowledge that can only grow when we allow ourselves not to know. And then things become possible that are not possible from the worldview and the technologies that come from the cult of quantity and the story of separation, the story that we're separate beings in a world of other. What can come from those is very limited, powerful in its realm, appropriate in its realm, but insufficient to the task before us. I have a friend from Brazil who runs a retreat center there, and he was telling me that they needed to accommodate 40 more guests for their retreats and stuff, and so he hired some indigenous builders to come, and he said, I'm not hiring them because they're indigenous, I'm hiring them because they're really good architects. So they came, and in 3 weeks, they built a building using only materials they found on the land, using no metal fasteners or anything that they brought in, using no power equipment, using no measuring tapes, and they built this structure that is a perfect marriage of form and function that keeps out the rain, yet it lets the smoke through the roof, that sleeps 40 people, that is warm in the winter and cool in the summer, that when he measured it, he found that it was like to within the millimeter, perfect golden mean proportions. A building that architects come to see, professional architects, and they begin to weep because there's no way that they could build this thing, especially not in 3 weeks. It's so far beyond what they know how to do, and it has a living presence that is almost absent in any architecture you see today, as if civilization were in steep decline. Like, why is the built environment so ugly now? Anyway, that is the kind, or maybe you've had personal experience of healing from a condition that medical science says was impossible to heal from, that was incurable. Miracles being something that's impossible from an old story and possible in a new story that point to the existence of a new story. And when I hear those stories, I'm like, if that's possible for a body, what's possible for the body politic? What's possible for the ecological body? What are we accepting as limits that is just the shadow of our own views? So, gosh, now I've really gotten myself into a corner. Yeah, but okay. So I'm going to just ask everybody to, without talking, but only using your hand, find a conversation partner. And if there's some people left out, you can do this with yourself, but just hold hands with a person next to you, but without talking, thank you. And we'll just do this one way, but afterwards, if there's a break or something, you can do it the other way. So one of you will be the questioner. See, because we don't have time for Q&A, so I'm doing a crowdsourced Q&A here. Because everything I'm saying, people already know. So one of you will ask a question, and I would like you to ask from fear. Fear is like the new bad guy that we're supposed to overcome, and then we won't have any limitations and stuff like that. But, I think that fear, when a fear comes up as, in our experience, as limiting, like I'm kind of done with that fear, it points us toward a sacrifice that we're ready to make. So it is to be attended to. And this, to translate the fear into a question, is a useful way of bringing attention to it and entering the gateway to sacrifice. But that's a whole other thing. So the other person will answer the question from your knowing that a more beautiful world is possible. And you know it because you've seen it through an experience you've had that you knew wasn't a trick. So, just a 1-minute conversation beginning in 15 seconds. So, askers go into just close your eyes for a minute and feel that spot of fear and doubt. Forget your metaphysics and ask your partner, and I'll give you a minute. Okay, so please come into silence so I can say goodbye to you, because I like to respect the time here, and I've got a flashing hourglass in front of me. So, yeah, so that was kind of clumsy the way, I was hoping to have more time for that, but I got carried away by the sound of my own voice. So, and I'll just leave you with the thought, leave you with the paradox and the mystery and the suggestion that it's okay not to know, despite all the answers that we get here. Thank you for your attention.